Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting of the Income Generation Subcommittee. My name is Steve Mackay, and I'm the chair of the committee. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. Continue. Thank you. So all emergency escape routes are clearly signed, and once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. This is a public meeting, and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording, and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded, and for any footage to be broadcast or published. The members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. So hopefully it won't be too long before we can forget all these formalities, and we'll move on to some sort of ordinary normality. Thank you for that. We can move to agenda item 1, which is appointment of substitutes.
We have Councillor Bissett for Councillor Stephen, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any councillor with declaration of interest in relation to tonight's proceedings? No, none. Okay, thank you. Margaret, in relation to public participation, item 3.
There's no public participation, Chair.
Moving towards the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of July. Are we happy that everybody's read? I can sign them, they're approved. Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I will do that. And so then we move to item 5, agenda item 5 on pages 5 to 24, which is the Freedom Leisure proposed fees and charges for 2022. And Sean, will you present that, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the first stage in our fees and charges review for this year. As members are aware, the process of Freedom Leisure is slightly different because their pricing year starts from the 1st of January. Therefore, we review their fees and charges earlier than the rest of those for the council, which begin from 1st of April. The route to council for approval of these is through the Communities Committee, which looks in detail at Freedom Leisure's work and therefore considers the fee charges in the round, as well as looking through the details. And there was a very detailed discussion about that at the latest committee meeting. And then through to the Income Generation Committee, which is constitutionally responsible for making recommendations to councils on increases in fees and charges. The framework for that decision is the Commercial Strategy and Income Generation Strategies, which the committee approved previously. And that allows for, or sets out an approach, which is that fees and charges should increase in line with inflation, unless there are specific reasons for not doing so or for choosing a different amount. As you can see from paragraph 3.1, in the round, Freedom Leisure's charges are at the level of inflation increase of 3.2%, although there are various individual changes. Details for those are set out in the report, and there was a lengthy discussion at the Communities Committee. Sorry, thank you, Mark, on that, as I said the other week. The one sort of issue which came out of that sort of unanswered question was why there were increases for pay-as-you-go customers as opposed to those customers who are members of Freedom Leisure. And the answer was that had been the way it was when the contract first started. It had always been that way, that the focus had, that they got different approaches to setting fees for those two areas. But they were willing to keep that under review and would have a further assessment of whether that was the right approach time for the next round fee setting. Other than that, the committee were happy to accept the proposals and recommended them in total for consideration here this evening.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, and appreciating that it has already gone through Communities Committee, and I think Vice Chair of this committee, Jabba, you were on that committee, and yeah, okay. Has anybody got any questions in relation to it, or are we happy that this report is noted and it goes to the full council in the usual manner?
I'm stealing
Yeah, Councillor Bishop.
words that were said to me by Councillor Stafford earlier. What is the benefit of it coming to this committee, considering it's gone through communities who are the decision-making senior committee, because they're a full committee, and then it comes to us and we sort of rubber stamp it. I mean, we could speak all we wanted on it, I guess, but effectively it's just passing through us. Our vice chair sits on communities as well, so he's probably heard all the discussion. I'm just wondering. I'm sure there's a wonderfully eloquent reason why it should happen, but it does just seem as if it's another step in the process where it's not a huge amount of value is going to be added, and that's not because the members of this committee can't add value. It's because the main discussion has already taken place, and if we really wanted to, we could always go and speak our piece at communities.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect it may be that it's historic in the fact that fees that we get from the freedom leisure as management fees are looked upon as income generation. But Shane, you've got anything to?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. The simple answer, it's not terribly eloquent, is the fact that the Constitution states that changes to fees and charges recommended to Council by the constitutional function of this committee. So technically, therefore, it needs to be here. The value that the committee can add in this process is the one which I emphasised in the introduction, that we can review them and say, well, do they accord with the overall policies that have been set by the Council, as opposed to the details that the Communities Committee might accept. I mean, for example, the Communities Committee may accept that the principles of the charging are fine from the needs of the communities, but they stand somewhat outside the policies of the Council, in which case this committee's role would be to challenge that and feedback to communities or onto Council with a revised recommendation, for example. To note, one option might be to note approval to go to Council meeting on 30th of November, subject to the Council being aware that this is outside the Council's policy or something of that sort. So there is an opportunity to add value as a sort of quality control.
So I think, therefore, as it stands, it's for us to say whether we are happy to note this report and effectively pass it on to full Council for their consideration. Yeah, thank you very much indeed. So moving on to agenda item 6, where the subject is in relation to football facilities at Purdyswell, with a recommendation that this subcommittee approve funding of up to £10,000, I say up to £10,000, from the Income Generation Fund to undertake revision of financial assessments. And that's in view of the fact that things have changed quite dramatically over the last months. Again, Shane, is that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the report is self-explanatory. I've now had a proposal which is considerably lower than £10,000. So certainly won't require all of that funding to do the updates. On the next report, I'll give an update on progress on the all-weather pitch plans, which is part of this item, but it's better under the next item. It's simply a request for the funding to carry out the work which the committee considered at its previous meeting. Members will recall that at that meeting, we decided to have a sort of informal discussion around how we take forward these developments. And it was there that I suggested that we'd need to have a little bit of financing to do some cost revision. So I'm coming back to the committee for that.
Yeah, thank you, Shane. From my own sort of point of view, I suppose that it could be money well spent, but unless anybody's got any other opinions, Andy, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that in previous discussions, we talked about the facility being sort of multi-use as well as football, and certainly with the sort of the concept that if you're organising team sports, it's going to be very much evenings and weekend use if you're trying to get 10, 12 people together. But during the day, if it can be, facility can be used for, I think was it paddle, tennis or badminton or sports, but that only require 1 or 2 people, it's obviously much more viable to get 2 people to go during the day. So I'd just like to know if you confirm that sort of broad scope is part of the review.
Through you, Chair, yeah, certainly it's a facility which could be used for other things. The one other option to have a look at, which I've asked the consultant to consider, is the futsal facility would be an indoor facility covering the 2 existing 5-a-side pitches and the ground next to them. So essentially there would be 4 small pitches, so it could be of a variety of use. Whether or not, as an alternative, we could simply put on a further facility, an open air facility, next to the existing 5-a-side pitches. So that again could be for multiple uses, doesn't necessarily need to be football. So we'll consider that when the report.
Thank you, Shane. Any other questions at all in relation to this one? No? Well, the recommendation is that we approve the funding of up to £10,000. Is everybody in agreement that we go ahead with that and agree it? Okay. Thank you. So then we come to the next agenda item, number 7, page 27, which is the Q2 performance report for 2021-22. Mark, you get the privilege of this one, I think.
Follows the thank you. It follows the normal format. The first 2 items summarising the latest progress on the commercial strategy delivery and the income strategy delivery. As in previous quarters, the commercial strategy focuses very much on the large infrastructure programmes that the council's undertaking. Future High Streets Fund and the Towns Fund, and that just sets out the latest position. Some properties have been acquired, others are under review, and the conversion and regeneration work will then be in the income strategy. This notes the impact of pandemic has had on the council's income streams, particularly car parking. Though the positive news there is that the income levels are starting to recover. So it remains to be seen whether they'll reach the pre-pandemic levels or not. Similarly with business rates, the council's collection of business rates at the moment is running behind where we would expect it to be at this year. But we are mindful that businesses are still recovering, managing their cash flow. We certainly have evidence of reinstating their direct debit payments. The third point then is around the sports facilities. The hockey centre is now substantially complete, hopefully be opening shortly. It notes about Freedom Leisure and the refurbishment of the 5-a-side pitches, which are now in use. And then the fact that we've had a meeting with Tudor Grange about an all-weather pitch proposal as well. And then last but not least, the development of a housing enabling strategy. That work is now underway and will be brought back to the committee. In terms of the performance indicators, I'll go briefly through these. The Riverside project related income, talked about this before, properties licensed Riverside. The Guildhall obviously was closed for quite a long time during the pandemic and income for nothing. Pleased to say that that is now starting to recover, and we don't have October on there because it falls outside of Q2, but the October income in itself was much improved. Again, positive signs. Trade waste collections continued throughout the pandemic, albeit at a reduced level. Some businesses closed, others requesting fewer collections. Again, that has now started to pick up with the students now back at the university. Hopefully we will see that closer back to the budget. Garden waste, as you know, we actually opened a number of new accounts during the pandemic. The signs are at the moment there were extra. Then from a property point of view, this relates to the large commercial properties that the council purchased, and positive news there is that the renters continued to be received throughout the pandemic. It's very slightly below budget. Settlement rent review didn't quite achieve the target that we'd set. The next graph is back to car parking. By a long way, the council's largest source of fees and charges income. As you can see, it has picked up markedly from the very low point of the final quarter of last year when the pandemic started. Currently, it's running at about 80% of the budget, which is good news, but 20% shortfall still represents approximately £600,000 a year to the council, so some way to go. And then on bereavement, as you might expect during the pandemic, the activity levels at the crematorium have been up and down. So pandemic easing off, the volumes have reduced, but at the moment it's running fairly close to the budget. Budget was, of course, reduced to reflect the opening of the new library. And then development management, always a difficult income stream to forecast and predict, because it can be distorted by a larger one-off applications, as you see with the spike in the middle of the graph, lowest more dwarfed. Since then, levels have steadied, gradual increase as we come out, running slightly below budget. And then last but not least, the neighbourhood income, quite a reduction here compared to last year because we lost the major contract here. However, having said that, we're still continuing to receive ad hoc requests for work from that customer. Hence at the moment, running above budget. And that's it. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Thanks very much, Mark. Any questions? Yes. Okay, take Councillor Bissett first, please.
I suspect everybody else knows this, but I've not sat on this committee before. So I'm just confused. I'm just wondering what neighbourhood means in connection with income generation.
Thank you. So the neighbourhood income relates to the street scene team doing work, for example, jetting work of the sewers, transporting the street sweepings from the city to their destination, which I think is up in the West Midlands, and that's on behalf of the county council.
So the money comes from the county council to us?
A large part of it, yes.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to ask about the rent review. So assume that has longer term implications. So how long is that rent review period cover, and what's the long term implications if it's lower than anticipated?
Well, clearly, if car parking income is the biggest contributor, it doesn't recover to 100%, then the council will have a longer term shortfall in its income. Which...
So I was referring to the rent review of the properties that the council owns.
Sorry, apologies.
Sorry, yeah, there's a rent review, and you're saying it's below expectations. I'm just wondering how long that is in for, and what the long term implications are.
Well, to put that into context, the shortfall in the rent review, I think, was worth about £30,000 a year, and rent review. So it's certainly not material.
Thanks, Chairman. The only question that I have is regarding the neighbourhood income. Was there any specific reason why we lost that contract? Was it due to poor customer service, etc.? If you can delve into that, and are you able to name the?
The contract was with the county council, and the county council, having reviewed its terms with other contractors, concluded that the work was actually already part of it. They didn't provide it as well.
Thank you, Chair, for me. The Riverside project-related income, and it talks to income received from property, renting of property and from trading licences. Does that include the Riverside Cafe, which we own? Because the income would strike me as being very small, considering the location of that property. If that includes the rental of that property as well, are we getting value for money?
You're absolutely right that the income there is primarily the cafe. Whether it's value for money, I can only say that it was let on a tender and the lease that was taken out.
So if I may follow back, these are some of the opportunities, I think, where the council could run those facilities and make more income from profit from running it properly, as opposed to letting someone else pay us and looking at the numbers on here, what I would call penny rent, as opposed to, it is without a shadow of a doubt one of the prime locations on the riverside. When I walked my dog along there, even during COVID, there were queues of people, and it's in poor condition. I think it's a grotty little cafe that I wouldn't take my mother to. However, it wouldn't take much to turn it into, I probably shouldn't have said that, but anyway, there are other cafes that you can go to, but anyway, but I would have thought with a bit of TLC, you could turn that into a bit of a destination location on the riverside, and we could generate, or the people of Worcester would generate or benefit from the income that was generated from there, because at this rate, I can't see we're getting value for that property. I've had this discussion. I know Shane's looking at me. I'd like to see us to do a little business case on that and see if we put a bit of money into it, what would we generate from it? Nothing else in that area. Jabba's looking at me. I know. About to say yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Riaz.
Yeah, Councillor Mitchell has, through you, Chair, Councillor Mitchell does have a point, but I mean, the argument then, there's two arguments to that. Is it's going to require a considerable amount of investment in terms to turn that into a destination. It's a destination for people along the side. We know that people go there, but in terms of the amount of money we invest in order to make it a premier facility, and fitting in with the Riverside strategy absolutely makes sense. But the wider picture is obviously it's going to be busy for 6 to 8 months, and you're going to get a really quiet period during that 4 months. Hence why the earlier point you mentioned, are we getting value for money? For that owner, probably yes, in terms of that. But if it came into our hands and we can use it in other ways, then absolutely. But the wider strategy with the coach park being there, I mean, we've got to decide where we go with that, I think, in terms of if that's going to be a location and we're going to keep the visitors coming in at Croft Road, then it ideally makes sense, doesn't it?
Councillor Mitchell.
For me, Chair, I've done a bit of survey around that place. It is the only cafe type coffee shop place between the university campus and the city centre campus, unless you're going to take a hard left and go to McDonald's. And you actually walk on the pathway, and I've paced it out, and it's 67 paces. So if it was well signed and it had decent Wi-Fi and somewhere nice to sit, I could just imagine during the day and during term times, so during the winter, students sitting there and doing their work, and you know, in between lectures, and then you've got the race course, which has 25 events a year. and there's nowhere really for anyone to stop on the way. I just think there's more that could be done with it if we really, and it's not going to be done within the 5 people sat here, but if someone sat down and said, right, let's have a look at this plan and let's see what we can do with this building that we own, and is in a pretty good location. And it might take a bit of investment. I completely agree. And, you know, that's why we need to do a proper case on it. So if we're going to put X thousand in, how long before we get the money back? But I just think it's a good location. And at £5 a year, I just don't think we're getting anything out of it. Sorry.
Councillor Stafford.
Sorry, not sorry. Thank
Yeah,
you.
sorry, and before you do, if you like, yeah, Shane, if you'd like to give a thought on that, it would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. Just to recap the kind of process that we went through. Obviously, this discussion has been going for a number of years now, and we did run an exercise looking at the potential income that could be generated at the time and the amount of investment which was seen to be required to turn it into the sort of facility we had in mind. And we couldn't develop a business case that supported that. So the decision was to go to market to see what people would offer in terms of a rent for the council. And we had very few applicants, and that the market wasn't ready to use the facility at the time. And so that we followed the process, took, as Mark has indicated, the highest bid. And that was the amount of income at that time we were able to generate for it. Now, it's an ongoing discussion. We've got the Riverside Park development, which has been underway, and there's still more work to do on that. We have within the town's investment fund, the Riverside Development Project, and of course the Arches project, which will open up the walkway from Foregate Street all the way down to the river, reducing the number of paces, presumably, it takes to get there. So these present an opportunity to reconsider the site and its location and what it can contribute to the Riverside Park in the fullness of time. So we'll continue to keep that under review. It'd be worth revisiting what was agreed in terms of the term of the let, conditions around that quite soon as part of that project.
Yeah, thank you, Shane. Yeah, Councillor Stafford.
Thank you. Just following on, I mean, I'd be open-minded to looking at options for the site, and from knocking it down and building something architecturally interesting that will attract people. As you say, it's going to be part of the future network with the Arches opening up and the Riverside Park. But I would differ from Councillor Mitchell. I'd say I'd still prefer the private sector to actually run any future potential facility rather than the council running it themselves, in terms of council sticking to its core business.
Yep, thank you. I'll tell you that was a comment as opposed to a question, wasn't it? Yes, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Riaz.
Culture sector as well, to have a riverside venue where we can have performing arts outside. And I know an idea was mooted a few years back in terms of that, an amphitheatre or a space outdoor in terms of performing that will just perfectly fit in terms of our cultural vision and an extension of that Arches project. In terms of picking up on Councillor Stafford's point, our core business is obviously provide services out for our community, but the times that we live in now means that we have to start exploring those other opportunities where we can actually, secure those services for our community, and that means diversification. And if it means that we can employ the skills and people to run those types of services in order to put that profit back onto the front line, I'm all for exploring those ideas.
Right, thanks very much indeed. Again, I think that was more of a comment than a question, but in some ways, Shane, you stole my thunder a little bit, because I was going to say that as the money that we've got in with the various grant funding that we're getting at the moment, the fact that the Riverside is a project that we're going to be taking forward in the fullness of time, I think, issues like this will come to the fore, and I think there'll be probably a great more sort of discovery of what we can actually do as a council, whichever way it goes. But the actual thoughts that are there will be taken on board and will be given very good consideration, I would have thought. I've only got one question for myself in relation to the sports facility. So we're going back a little bit on ourselves now. It talks about the the cost of the scheme in relation to the council's intention in relation to board and such like. The work's being commissioned in October. Do we have a finish date at all? Yeah, sure.
Through you, Chair, the two updates actually I'd give on this. The first is that I met with the representatives of the hockey club and the school on Friday of last week to discuss the loan transfer, 2.1 million, and their estimated practical completion date is the end of November. We open then, and they'll be looking to do a launch event around that time. I'll let you know about that. And the other update on that was around the meeting with Tudor Grange School, that we need to let them know what our intentions are. Well, I have now communicated to the school that we intend to bring forward our all-weather pitch proposal. Aware of that, and we've talked about the need for potential two-way discussion in partnership with the Football Foundation to see what that impact has on proposals around them.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much indeed. Any further questions at all? No? Okay, fine. Thank you. Well, that takes us then to the final matter of the exempt item on the agenda. Now, I can close the meeting down and we can go into an exempt session if anybody wishes to have any discussion in relation to the minutes that have been produced by in relation to that. In that case, I will sign those minutes duly, and I can now say that the meeting of the Income Gen for this evening is closed. Thank you very much indeed for attending.